By the spring of 1898, the world was already shaped by empires. European powers controlled vast territories across Asia, Africa, and the Pacific. Spain was one of the oldest of these empires. For more than 300 years, it ruled the Philippines from Manila, using the islands as a link between Asia and the Americas. But by the late 19th century, Spanish power was weakened. Its navy was outdated. Its economy was strained. Its colonies were restless. Across the Pacific Ocean, the United States was changing. For most of its history, the country focused inward, expanding across North America. By the 1890s, this period was ending. American industry was growing fast. Steel production increased. Railroads crossed the continent. Trade looked outward, toward Asia and the Pacific. American leaders began to see naval power as necessary to protect commerce and influence. One voice shaped this thinking more than any other. In 1890, naval officer and historian Alfred Thayer Mahan published The Influence of Sea Power Upon History. The book argued that strong navies were the foundation of great nations. It was read closely by politicians and military planners. Soon, the United States began to modernize its fleet, building steel warships powered by steam and armed with modern guns. At the same time, Spain faced serious trouble in the Caribbean. In Cuba, a Spanish colony, a long and violent rebellion was underway. Cuban insurgents fought Spanish forces for independence. Reports of harsh Spanish countermeasures reached the American press. Newspapers printed dramatic stories of suffering civilians. Public opinion in the United States turned sharply against Spain. Tensions increased through early 1898. American business interests in Cuba were threatened. Diplomatic relations worsened. In February 1898, the U.S. battleship USS Maine exploded in Havana Harbor. 268 sailors were killed. The exact cause was unclear, but many Americans blamed Spain. The phrase "Remember the Maine" spread quickly. On April 25, 1898, the United States declared war on Spain. The conflict became known as the Spanish-American War. While public attention focused on Cuba, American planners had already considered another theater of war far away. The Pacific mattered. If Spain could use the Philippines as a base, its navy might threaten American trade routes or reinforce Spanish forces elsewhere. In Washington, naval leaders moved quickly. Assistant Secretary of the Navy Theodore Roosevelt had long believed that Spain's Pacific Fleet should be destroyed at the start of any war. Orders were prepared even before the declaration. The goal was clear: remove Spain's naval power in the Pacific in a single blow. At the center of this plan was the U.S. Asiatic Squadron. It was based in Hong Kong, a British-controlled port. Its commander was Commodore George Dewey, a calm and experienced officer who had served in the American Civil War decades earlier. Dewey received orders to sail to the Philippines and engage the Spanish fleet there. Spain's forces in the region were commanded by Rear Admiral Patricio Montojo y Pazarán. He knew his situation was difficult. His ships were older, many built of wood or lightly armored steel. Repairs were slow. Supplies were limited. Coastal defenses around Manila Bay were incomplete. Still, Spain could not abandon the Philippines without a fight. As April ended, both sides prepared. One fleet crossed open ocean, confident in its training and equipment. The other waited near its colonial capital, aware that help would not arrive in time. By the night of April 30, 1898, the war in the Pacific was about to begin, not with armies on land, but with ships moving silently toward Manila Bay. In late April 1898, Manila Bay became the center of Spanish defense in the Philippines. The bay was wide and deep, with a narrow southern entrance guarded by the island of Corregidor and smaller fortifications along the coast. On maps, it looked strong. In reality, many defenses were unfinished or lightly armed. Mines had been placed, but not in a complete or modern pattern. Coastal guns existed, but coordination was poor. Rear Admiral Patricio Montojo knew these weaknesses well. He had requested stronger ships and better defenses for years. Those requests were denied or delayed. Spain's navy had suffered from years of limited funding and slow modernization. When war came, Montojo had to fight with what he had. The Spanish Pacific Squadron consisted of 7 main ships. The flagship was the protected cruiser Reina Cristina. She was built in the 1880s, lightly armored, and carried medium-caliber guns. Alongside her were the cruisers Castilla, Don Antonio de Loa, Don Juan de Austria, Isla de Cuba, and Isla de Luzon, along with the small gunboat Marqués del Duero. Several of these ships were in poor condition. Castilla had engine trouble and could not move under her own power. Others had worn barrels and limited ammunition. Spanish crews faced shortages as well. Many sailors were colonial recruits with limited training. Ammunition stocks were low, and much of it was old. Coal supplies were scarce, reducing mobility. Repair facilities in Manila were basic. There was no realistic way to match a modern enemy fleet at sea. Montojo originally planned to defend the bay closer to the shore, near Cavite, where shallow water could allow damaged ships to be beached instead of sunk. This would save lives and possibly guns. He knew that engaging in open water would mean quick destruction. His goal was not victory, but resistance. Across the Pacific, the U.S. Asiatic Squadron was far better prepared. Commodore George Dewey commanded 6 modern ships, the protected cruisers USS Olympia, his flagship, Baltimore, Raleigh, Boston, and Concord, along with the revenue cutter McCulloch. These vessels were steel-built, steam-powered, and armed with rapid-fire guns and heavier naval artillery. American crews were well-trained. Gunnery drills had been conducted regularly. Fire control systems were simple by later standards but effective. Ammunition was modern and plentiful. Coal bunkers were filled before departure. The squadron had practiced coordinated movement and signaling at sea. Dewey's orders were clear and direct. He was instructed to enter Manila Bay, locate the Spanish fleet, and destroy it. There were no orders to attack the city itself. Neutral civilians and foreign powers were to be avoided as much as possible. Speed and decisiveness were emphasized. On April 27, Dewey sailed from Hong Kong, escorted at first by British neutrality patrols until he cleared the port. By April 30, his squadron approached the Philippine coast. That night, the ships moved toward the entrance of Manila Bay in darkness, lights dimmed, guns ready. They passed Corregidor without serious challenge. Spanish shore batteries either failed to detect them or fired inaccurately. By early morning on May 1, both fleets were in position. One was anchored, waiting. The other was moving forward in formation. The battle would not be long, but every decision made in the next few hours would echo far beyond the bay itself. By 1898, naval warfare was changing fast. Steel hulls, steam engines, and modern guns were replacing wooden ships and older weapons. At Manila Bay, this change was clear in every detail. The American ships were built with steel frames and protected decks. Their engines were reliable. Their guns used modern smokeless powder, which fired farther and more accurately. Many of these guns could fire quickly, allowing steady and controlled bombardment. Range finding and signaling, though simple, were practiced and effective. The Spanish ships reflected an earlier era. Some were partly wooden. Others had thin armor that could not stop heavy shells. Several guns were outdated or worn from years of service. Smoke from black powder often blocked vision after firing. Ammunition quality was uneven, with shells that sometimes failed to explode. Speed also mattered. American ships could move, turn, and reposition during combat. Spanish vessels, especially Castilla, could not. Being anchored made them easier targets. This difference did not guarantee an instant result, but it shaped the battle from the first shots. One fleet could choose distance and timing. The other could only endure. Commodore George Dewey did not rely on chance. His plan was simple and controlled. The American squadron advanced in a single line, moving back and forth across the Spanish position. This allowed each ship to fire its broadside guns in turn while maintaining steady movement. The formation reduced confusion. Orders were clear. Signal flags were visible. Each captain knew when to fire and when to hold. Movement also made it harder for Spanish gunners to aim accurately. The Spanish plan was defensive. Admiral Montojo placed his ships near shallow water, close to shore. His hope was to limit losses and save lives if ships were damaged. He expected heavy fire and planned for survival, not maneuver. This difference mattered. One side controlled the rhythm of battle. The other reacted to it. For the men on both sides, the battle was personal and physical. American sailors had been awake for hours. They stood by their guns in heavy heat, wearing thick uniforms. The smell of coal smoke and oil filled the air. Orders were shouted over engine noise. Spanish sailors faced even harsher conditions. Many ships lacked proper ventilation. Heat built quickly. Smoke from their own guns filled enclosed spaces. Medical supplies were limited. Still, crews stayed at their posts. Most of these men had never seen combat at sea. Training mattered, but fear was real. Each shell that landed shook steel and wood. Injuries came suddenly. The battle was decided by machines and plans, but it was endured by human bodies. Rear Admiral Patricio Montojo commanded under severe limits. He did not choose Manila Bay because it was ideal. He chose it because there were few alternatives. Spanish naval doctrine expected fleet support from Europe, but none could arrive. Coal shortages limited movement. Repair docks were inadequate. Montojo knew his ships could not outrange or outgun the American fleet. His reports before the war warned of this imbalance. When war came, his duty was to resist, even if defeat was certain. He placed his ships where crews might survive by swimming ashore if vessels were destroyed. During the battle, Montojo moved his flag from Reina Cristina after she was heavily damaged. This was not an act of escape, but command survival. He continued to issue orders until organized resistance was no longer possible. His decisions were shaped by reality, not ambition. The outcome reflected structural weakness more than personal failure. Naval battles are fought long before the first shot. At Manila Bay, logistics played a silent role. The American squadron had secured high-quality coal in Hong Kong. Ammunition was inspected and stored properly. Gun crews drilled until loading and firing became routine. Spanish logistics told a different story. Coal was rationed. Some ships entered battle with limited fuel. Ammunition shortages meant careful firing, but accuracy suffered. Faulty shells reduced effectiveness. When guns overheated or jammed, repair options were few. Damage control teams worked with limited tools. These small failures accumulated. Logistics did not decide the battle alone, but they removed the possibility of recovery. Dewey took a calculated risk by entering Manila Bay at night. Mines were rumored, but their exact locations were unknown. Shore batteries could have caused damage. Yet delay would give Spain time to prepare further. The risk succeeded because of planning and timing. Spanish defenses were incomplete. Surprise was achieved without total secrecy. Once inside the bay, Dewey maintained control, avoiding reckless pursuit and conserving strength. This balance between caution and decisiveness defined the engagement. The battle became not just a test of firepower, but of command judgment. The stage was now set for the moment when plans turned into action. May 1, 1898. Shortly after 5:40 a.m. The sun is now above the horizon. Light spreads across Manila Bay, cutting through the morning haze. The American squadron moves steadily forward in a single line. At the front is USS Olympia, Commodore George Dewey's flagship. Behind her follow Baltimore, Raleigh, Petrel, Concord, and Boston. Their engines turn at a controlled speed. Guns are trained to port. The Spanish ships remain anchored near Cavite. Smoke rises from their funnels. Crews wait at their stations. Some guns are aimed. Others are still being prepared. Distance between the fleets closes to just over 5,000 yards. At approximately 5:41 a.m., the first Spanish shot is fired. It falls short. More follow, splashing into the water before reaching the American line. The range is long. Accuracy is poor. Aboard Olympia, Dewey waits. He allows the squadron to move closer. When the distance shortens, he gives the order that has been remembered in official records. Fire when ready. American guns open in sequence. Heavy shells leave the barrels with sharp cracks. Smoke briefly covers the decks, then clears as the ships continue moving. The line passes in front of the Spanish position, firing as it goes. Shells strike Reina Cristina and Castilla. Splinters fly. fires begin to burn. Spanish guns reply, but their fire remains scattered. Some shells explode in the water. Others hit without causing serious damage. The American line turns and repeats the pass. Again, guns fire in rhythm. Crews reload quickly. Signals are steady. Damage reports are calm. On Spanish ships, conditions worsen. Heat increases. Smoke thickens. Men work to control fires while continuing to fire back. Officers move between stations, maintaining order. By mid-morning, several Spanish ships are burning. Ammunition lockers are threatened. Casualties rise. The sound of battle echoes across the bay, rolling toward the city of Manila. What began as distant gunfire is now a sustained and controlled destruction, unfolding minute by minute. As the morning advances, the balance of the battle becomes clear. The American squadron maintains its movement, passing the Spanish line again and again. Each pass brings more damage. Gunnery remains controlled. Ammunition is conserved. Engines continue without failure. On the Spanish flagship Reina Cristina, conditions become critical. Repeated hits destroy upper works. Fires spread across the deck. Steering becomes difficult. Casualties increase among gun crews. Admiral Montojo orders the ship to move forward in an attempt to close the distance and use torpedoes, but concentrated American fire forces her to turn back. Soon after, Reina Cristina is no longer able to fight effectively. Montojo transfers his flag to Isla de Cuba. Not long after, that ship also comes under heavy fire. One by one, Spanish vessels are disabled. Castilla, already immobile, burns intensely. Her wooden structure feeds the flames. With engines useless and guns falling silent, the decision is made to abandon her. Other ships are deliberately run aground in shallow water to prevent sinking and to allow crews to escape. Around 7:30 a.m., Dewey orders a temporary withdrawal. Reports had reached him that ammunition might be running low. The American ships pull back and firing stops. For nearly 2 hours, the bay is quiet except for fires and explosions from burning Spanish vessels. During this pause, ammunition is checked. The reports are mistaken. Supplies remain sufficient. Dewey orders the attack to resume. When American ships return, organized Spanish resistance is nearly over. Remaining guns are silenced quickly. By late morning, the Spanish squadron is destroyed as a fighting force. Some ships are sunk. Others burn at anchor or lie grounded along the shore. At approximately 12:30 p.m., firing ends. The water is covered with debris. Smoke hangs over Cavite. The battle has lasted only a few hours, but its result is complete. The silence that follows marks more than the end of a battle. It signals a turning point that will reshape the war and the future of the Pacific. When the guns fall silent on May 1, 1898, the scale of the outcome becomes visible across Manila Bay. Smoke continues to rise from wrecked Spanish ships near Cavite. Fires burn unchecked on several hulks. Masts lean at sharp angles. Debris floats on the surface of the water. The human cost is uneven but real. Spanish losses are severe. Official Spanish reports list more than 160 sailors killed and over 200 wounded, though exact numbers vary by source. Many injuries are caused by shell fragments, burns, and collapsing structures. Medical facilities on shore are quickly overwhelmed. Sailors who escape burning ships swim to land, some injured, some exhausted. American casualties are minimal by comparison. No American sailors are killed in direct combat. Fewer than 10 are wounded, mostly by heat exhaustion or minor injuries during gun operations. Several ships report light damage above the waterline, but none are seriously impaired. The physical destruction of the Spanish Pacific Squadron is nearly total. Reina Cristina is burned and later scuttled. Castilla is destroyed by fire. Don Antonio de Ulloa is sunk. Isla de Cuba and Isla de Luzon are grounded and rendered unusable. Spain's naval power in the Pacific ceases to exist in a single morning. Commodore Dewey sends a formal report to Washington describing the engagement. His tone is factual. He emphasizes discipline, accuracy, and control. There is no exaggeration. The report confirms that Manila itself was not attacked, and civilian areas were largely spared. In Manila, Spanish authorities face a new reality. The city remains under Spanish control, but the bay is no longer defended. Spanish land forces are isolated. Supplies and reinforcements cannot arrive by sea. Foreign naval observers, including British and German ships, watch closely from a distance. News of the battle travels slowly at first, then rapidly. When word reaches the United States, the reaction is immediate. The victory is clear, decisive, and easy to understand. The American public sees proof that its modern navy works as planned. But beneath the headlines, the true weight of the battle is still unfolding. The destruction of the Spanish fleet at Manila Bay changes the Spanish-American War at once. Spain can no longer defend its Pacific territories by sea. The Philippines, though not immediately occupied, are effectively cut off. Any hope of reinforcement from Europe ends on May 1, 1898. For the United States, the victory creates new responsibilities. Dewey controls the bay, but he does not have enough troops to capture Manila on land. He maintains a naval blockade and waits. In the weeks that follow, American forces cooperate indirectly with Filipino revolutionary leader Emilio Aguinaldo, who has returned from exile to resume the fight against Spanish rule. This cooperation is tactical, not formal, and its limits are not clearly defined. Strategically, the battle confirms the value of modern naval power. It proves that steel ships, trained crews, and organized command can decide outcomes quickly and with limited losses. Naval planners around the world take note. Observers from Britain, Germany, and Japan study the engagement carefully. Reports are analyzed in foreign navies. The balance of global power shifts in subtle but important ways. Spain, once a major imperial force, loses its last strong fleet outside Europe. Its position as a colonial empire weakens further. Within months, Spain will lose not only the Philippines, but also Guam and Puerto Rico. The United States emerges as a naval power beyond its own shores. Control of Manila Bay gives it a strategic position in East Asia. Trade routes, coaling stations, and influence now extend across the Pacific. This expansion is not fully planned in advance, but it becomes unavoidable. Within the U.S. Navy, Manila Bay becomes a case study. Dewey's command style, emphasis on training, and controlled aggression are praised. The battle reinforces the ideas promoted by naval theorists who argued that command of the sea decides wars before armies meet. Yet the consequences are not only military. The defeat of Spain in the Philippines raises questions that have no immediate answers about colonial rule, local independence, and the role of the United States as a governing power. These questions will shape events long after the smoke of Manila Bay has cleared. The Battle of Manila Bay stands as a moment when technology, planning, and human endurance intersected with history. In just a few hours on May 1, 1898, one fleet was destroyed, another remained almost unscathed, and the balance of power in the Pacific shifted forever. The victory was not the result of luck. It was the outcome of preparation, discipline, and understanding of modern naval warfare. Steel hulls and rapid-fire guns mattered, but so did clear orders, coordinated movement, and calm execution under pressure. The men who fired the guns, managed the engines, and endured the heat and smoke played a critical role. Each act of duty contributed to a larger outcome that reshaped nations. For Spain, the defeat was devastating. Its Pacific Fleet, the last symbol of its centuries-long global reach, ceased to exist. The Philippines, isolated and exposed, faced a new power emerging on the world stage. For the United States, the battle was proof that a modern navy could project power across oceans and influence distant conflicts decisively. Beyond tactics and technology, Manila Bay illustrates a broader lesson of history, that change can be sudden and consequences far-reaching. A few hours of battle determined control over islands, reshaped empires, and demonstrated the growing importance of industrialized warfare. Even today, the bay remains a symbol of transformation. The clash of steel and strategy, the human endurance under fire, and the calculated decisions of commanders all continue to echo in naval academies and history books. The battle did not just end a fleet, it marked the beginning of a new era in global power and naval warfare. Calm waters now cover the site, but the story of May 1, 1898, remains etched in history.